to Maximum Production, a Holstein Friesian New Zealand podcast about everything to do with cows. I'm Amelia, and today we are talking about traits other than production, or TOP, as it's better known. Hopefully by the end of this episode, you will have a better idea about what TOP is and how you can use it as a tool to improve your herd. Joining me today is a returning favourite on the podcast, the incredible Wendy Harker. Wendy is a classifier with Holstein Friesian New Zealand, so welcome back, Wendy.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
So, Wendy, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background as a classifier and why you became a classifier?
I was interested in classification probably when the classifier first came to our place. We were starting out with pedigree cows. We were grading up from a grade herd as such that didn't have particularly high type behind it. So I was very interested when the classifier came out. In those days, there was a volunteer that went around and took the classifiers to other people's herds. So I was recording for the classifier and just thought it was something that I could be interested in the future. I had young kids at the time, so I happened to mention that I might be interested in it. And lo and behold, a year later, I was sitting the test and got qualified and have been classifying ever since. Certainly, you start off as a TOP inspector going up to sire proving herds. And then as you've seen more cattle, you build up to start classifying the pedigree cattle and giving final classification scores.
And you've got a lot of experience.
I'm trying to remember actually when I did first qualify. I think we might be coming up 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Me and Tony O'Connor classified at the same time. So I was one of the young ones there, and unfortunately I'm now one of the old ones, so it must be some time.
So what is traits other than production, or TOP?
As you mentioned, it's a collection of traits that we score. There's 15 different traits that we score on every animal, and then we collect an additional body condition score on 2-year-old animals when we score those. On top of that, also we collect comment codes on any major faults that we see. A good example of this is an undershot jaw, really long toes, either on the front feet or the rear feet, any double teats that we see, kind of faults that would affect the longevity of the cow. And traits other than production is really about gathering information that is about the longevity and the health of the cow. We're trying to get a good, healthy cow that lasts a number of years and it's not going to be culled for any other reasons other than production or health traits outside of the type. So it's just gathering good information.
So, as you said, we score 15 traits in New Zealand. What currently are the traits that we're scoring here?
So they have just been slightly adjusted, but the 15 traits currently collected is the stature. That is a straight measurement. If you see a classifier walking around with a stick, it's not to sort anybody out. It's actually got measurements on there at certain heights. We run our measuring stick, we put that on the fence on a flat area and walk the cows past that stick. And it is solely just measuring their height at the shoulders. And they're in ranges. So from a 1 to 9 scale, whether they're short or tall, basically. So 1 being very, very small, and 9...
It's 110 and below?
Yes, is 1. And then they go up in 5 centimetre increments right up to a 9. And then anything over a 9 is just considered a 9, so a taller animal. The next trait that we measure is capacity, and we take two major things into account. It's the width between the front legs as well as the depth of the rib, or depth and spring of the rib of the cow. So you're really looking at the capacity to hold feed in there as well as kind of heart room, which is just essential for the life of the cow. There's a real positive correlation between capacity and fertility.
And you're wanting the wider the chest, deeper the body.
Yeah. So 1 is very shallow and 9 is very capacious.
When I was training as an inspector, the incredible Grant Lilly, who trained me, he used to tell me that if you could fit a conventional bale between her front legs, that was a 9.
Yep.
Or if she could fit her head between her front legs, that was a 9.
Very much so.
And I always look at it, so being the nerd that I am, to create 1 litre of milk, cow needs to pump 600 litres of blood.
Yes.
So the more heart and lung room, the more efficient she is at being able to pump that blood to create that milk. So capacity is a very important trait for a cow to have.
Absolutely essential. However, on saying that, if your cow isn't a 9 capacity, it doesn't mean that she's not a really good cow. It is a trait that if you are 4 and below, then I consider that a very serious fault on a cow. However, if you're in that 6, 7, 8 range, that can be a really good functional cow.
And I think also it is dependent on age. You're not
Yes.
necessarily going to see a lot of 9 capacity 2 and 3 year olds.
2 and 3 year olds, yes.
But a 6, 7 capacity 2-year-old is quite a good capacious.
Absolutely.
For that age group.
Yeah, more than happy if I have 2-year-olds coming through in that 6, 7 range. That's met my goals, and I think they do develop out. Feed can make a difference to capaciousness, but in remembering this score is with all TOP traits, it's in comparison to her herd mates. So by us giving them score, it's very much about comparing, is she more capacious than her herd mates within there? So it's comparing animals raised in the same conditions, which animals are more capacious, as in all the traits actually, they're all compared to each other, trying to get the genetic difference rather than the actual. But yes, but it's good when all animals have got capacity. And the next trait that we had is rump angle. So this is measured from the middle of the hip to the top of the pin at the ears, and the ideal score is 5. It's what we call a two-way trait. So it's really giving a description of the angle rather than saying whether it's 9 being really good. It's descriptive. So if you see a 4 beside the rump angle score, then it means it's slightly high. 3, 2, and 1 means they're getting very high. I tend to call them ski jumps if it's a 1. Just those really easy to recognise when you see those really high pins. High pins, the reasons why we collect that information is that it helps with the reproduction. If you've got the pins so high, then when the animals are calving, there's no natural drainage of fluids. It's harder for a cow to push calves out if she's standing. It just doesn't help with calving at all. So it's really for reproductive purposes. I've also seen it have effect on walking, and that whole rump structure is all connected, and high pins can just be part of it.
Yeah, when you look at it, if you're being trained at university to calve cows, they always teach you it goes up and over the hill.
Yes.
So if you've got a ski ramp and you have to lift it higher, or she naturally has to push it higher, it's going to be harder to calve naturally, and she's more likely, scientifically,
Yes.
to require assistance. Whereas if you've got that levelness or that slight slope, it's giving you that downward slope on that hill.
That's it. And kind of what you said is true, isn't it? You get always the odd exception to that rule, as in that you get a very high pin cow and she lasts for ages and
calves on her own.
Calves are every year and every province, and it's always easy, but it's on average when all this data is collected, there's a higher percentage of difficulty in calving and reproduction issues over cows with extreme high pins. On the other side, if you see a score 6, 7 or 8, it means that those pins are very low compared to the hips. The ideal structure is that if you're in 4, 5, 6, it's not really what I would call a significant problem. It's once you're getting outside those ranges that you're getting to areas where it will affect the life of the cow.
Yeah.
The next one after that is the rump width, which is the bits that stick out at the end of the cow, basically, to get really untechnical.
So the pins or the tap?
The tap at the back, yes. When you're looking for body condition scoring, you're looking at that tap. That's where we're looking to judge the width between the tap. And again, this is all about, that's where the whole rump structure is set up. If there's no width between the pins, then there's no room for the udder to come down there. And again, back to calving, if there's no width between the pins, then you've got no room for calves to come out. So it's just calving ability and practical.
And that one's back to your one-way trait.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yes, 9 is very, very wide, and one being very, very narrow.
Where the tail can barely fit between the pin bones.
Pin bones, I would consider kind of, again, anything above a 6 is perfectly acceptable. 5, I'd start to look at it for breeding purposes.
I suppose, again, as a 2-year-old, you possibly wouldn't be as worried with a 5. But
yes,
as they get older,
it is a case of extreme width. Is it 9? I don't actually think is the absolute best. That's just straight description that she's very, very wide. But if you're getting those good 7 and 8 cows, and again, that does come with maturity. They are very good cattle to breed from. And as I've put emphasis on our own herd and seen the pin width increase, we've had less and less calving difficulties with particularly Friesian 2-year-olds having Holstein Friesian calves without any difficulties. So it just gives you more options. The next one after that is your rear legs rear view, and this is a new trait that's actually under trial at the moment. So it's we're in their 2nd year of trial. Came through pre-show from overseas. It was evidence that it had a very high correlation to herd life. Certainly in New Zealand, lameness is a big issue. And we needed more data around feet and legs. So rear legs review is very much getting behind the cow and seeing how straight she walks with the hocks compared to her feet, whether they are in a dead straight line or whether the feet are walking out on an angle. I was explained in Australia when they were teaching me is that if you ran a ruler behind the hocks, kind of at what point would the hocks cross, and if it was very close to the cow, that means that she's very hocky, which is the old term that we used to have. So we used to mark down LH for legs hockey, but now we're actually scoring them from 1 to 9, 1 being very, very hockey and 9 being very, very straight when she walks.
1 being pretty much those hocks or those knee joints are smacking each other as she walks.
As she walks, yeah. And you can see when she walks, if she's like that, she's whacking that udder around when she walks. Like you can see the whole udder movement because there's no room for the udder between the rear legs. So I find it a really good trait that I think will be to the advantage of New Zealand breeders and the New Zealand herd. It is one of those traits that it's essential that it's on concrete to judge and in a big enough space. So the facilities provided make a big difference to the accuracy of how we can collect that data.
Yeah, you need to be able to score it correctly. You really need to be able to get behind the animal and watch her walk
away.
Preferably in a straight line.
Preferably not at running pace. So
good luck.
Yes. So but I've found that there is a huge variation within herds on that trait. So looking forward to the data coming out. We've got 1 more year of collection, and then hopefully we can make sure that it's hereditary and we'll have a breeding value.
And so people are still able to get that data, but it doesn't have a breeding value. Is that correct?
Correct. You can't look it up on Minder and look up your breeding value for rear legs review. It's just not available yet, and nor can you look up a bull at this stage and look at the trait rear legs review on the bull proofs, just because it's not an official proof yet. Progress for the future. The next trait after that one is rear leg set. So that's from the side view, so that you look side in the curvature in the hock. Really, this rear leg side view is what I consider the shock absorbers of the cow. So if she needs some curvature to her leg, otherwise all the pressure from walking goes straight down into the hocks and into the foot, and there's no shock absorption, so the foot takes all that pressure. And again, will lead to lameness. On the other way, if it's too curved, you get the real curved legs and the foot gets thrown forward, and it's just, again, more inclined towards long toes and exposing the soft part of the hoof.
Because they end up walking on the back of the heels rather than the toes, so they're more prone to stone bruising because it's softer.
Yeah, again, not always the case on every single cow, but when you work it out on average, and even logically, it just makes sense. So the perfect score, again, this is as with the rump angle, it is a two-way trait, it's a descriptive trait, and 6, 5, 6 is a perfectly acceptable leg. 7's okay. If you're starting to get into the 8s and 9s, you're just risking that damage to the foot, or that the legs need to
And
be
the
a little
skis are
straight.
there.
And the skis. On the other way, if you're looking at 4s, 3s, for straight legs, which we are seeing in some cases, that is also really a bad trait and does not lead to good walking for cattle, particularly if they have to go for distances. So
I'd love to hear your opinion on this, Wendy. I went to a farm a few years ago and they had a lot of hills.
yes,
And they said the 7 legs, so that's slightly more what we call sickle, coped better on the hills. Would you agree with that?
they've probably got better shock absorption. Yes, if that was the case, I would probably agree that a 7 would be better than a 5 leg on the hills, that they would cope. And
None of these cows had any issues walking. They didn't have long toes or anything like that. They were very well looked after. Heard it is something that you do tend to see a little bit more naturally. I
yeah,
think it's more of a not necessarily coming from the bulls or anything like that. It's just natural selection has actually just created them to be slightly more curved to
correct.
suit that environment.
And it would make sense if you think that the curvature is like shock absorbers, and you actually don't want your shock absorbers too soft, and that's what I would consider a 8 or 9 toes. But if you have them too firm, you're also doing damage. So perhaps that's where I could see that a 7, just a little bit more shock absorption in there on a hill coming down, particularly on coming down, that would make sense.
And I guess that's the same with us. You know, when we walk up a hill, having that lower center of gravity
Yeah,
actually makes you have better balance, and having that slight curve to the legs, just a little bit more than what we would say is ideal,
yeah.
then it is great giving you that slightly lower center of gravity and hopefully better balance walking up and down the hills.
Yes. Yeah. And it's very true. Your natural selection will tend to say what works on your place as well as genetics. So then there's one more foot trait, and that was an additional trait that we also brought in this year, and that is foot angle. So we're measuring the angle from the top of the hoof to the floor. 45 degrees is considered a 5. If it's lower
More shallow.
or more shallow than that, and that's where you end up with your long toes and your pedal feet. So that's considered a 1 when they're very low on foot angle. They tend to have the long toes, the hoof is a little longer, at the base of the hoof is much longer. At the other end is a 9 where the hoof angle is very, very steep. And
Like a brown Swiss cow.
yes, brown Swiss are tending to be very high on foot angle.
They're also very straight-legged.
Yeah. As with any of these traits, the whole rump structure, and they all work together to create either lameness or make a healthy cow. And of course, there's so many health traits that come into lameness as well. But it's, again, additional data that we can collect and hopefully predict the bulls that are going to leave animals that are going to last longer. So this is all about health traits. If we can avoid lameness, or we can avoid breeding animals that create cows with bad feet, then it's, yeah, for the positive for the whole herd in New Zealand. Again, this one is absolutely essential to be on concrete to measure accurately.
It's a bit hard to score foot angle when you're standing in grass.
Correct. So that's just like all the other traits, it's in comparison to all the other herd mates in there, that if you get one cow that is very high in angle and another one that's very low, if they're reared in the same condition, then that's a genetic difference, not conditions of the farm. So that's what we're after. Again, not available yet on bull proofs, hopefully in the next year or two. After we've completed another year of inspections, they'll have sufficient data to actually bring up breeding values and can provide that information to farmers in New Zealand. So once we've done all the foot traits and what I consider body traits, then we move on to the udder traits. Udder's so essential to longevity of a cow, particularly, I believe anyhow, in the high production herds and in the once a day herds where these cows are expected to to carry lots of milk.
She's got to hold 40 odd litres in there, then you want it to be able to hold 40 litres and her not kick it as she walks.
Yes, and you don't need a massive udder to hold a huge amount of milk. You need it well attached and with a good texture. So for the first trait for the udder that we score is your udder support. We take two things into account. One's the strength of the ligament that runs right through the centre of the udder. Easy to see the crease.
Medial suspensory
ligament is the official term, correct. And it's the definition of that crease, and you can easy to see if you're walking behind your herd. You see some cows with a really clear crease through the middle, and some with just nothing defined, or what I consider a flat floor to the udder, where there's no division between the quarters through the centre. The suspensory ligament is just vital for maintaining the height of the udder and the strength of that udder, and if it's not low and around the hocks, then again it's not getting banged around. I think you get much better mastitis, lower somatic cells from udders that are held up high. The difference, I think, in suspensory ligaments really highlighted as the cow ages, but we need to pick that up as 2-year-olds so that we're judging that. So it's also, as I mentioned, the depth of the udder. If the udder's at a heifer's hocks at a 2-year-old, it's never going to get shallower. So
it's just going to keep getting lower and lower.
Keep getting lower, yeah. So I think it's the essential part of an udder.
I always think of it when I'm scoring udder support. If you think of the medial suspensory ligament as like a bungee cord,
yes,
that's connecting to a net that's tucked up on the inside of the legs, and it's the strength of the bungee cord, and you should be able to see it from the belly to where it connects on the bottom of the vulva, and its job is to lift that whole section up.
Absolutely, well put. And if you see a classifier or a TOP inspector kind of trying to look down underneath the udder, that's what they're looking for. It's making sure that that's attached right through the udder to the front. And yeah, because sometimes it's difficult to see. But
and sometimes you can see when those front teats are starting to flatten.
Yes.
So it looks like it goes and then it flattens out where the front teats are.
The difficult thing to predict, like sometimes I've been told that, she got a good score for udder support as a 2-year-old, but her udder went as a 5. But things like trauma and other issues actually it's just like everybody's muscle, that we're judging them as 2-year-olds, but we don't know what's happened in between. So as they age, so there's always those cows where the udder does breakdown, but on the whole, back to the averages, if she's got a strong suspensory ligament as a 2-year-old, it'll be maintained all the way through. It's an interesting one when you actually start looking at the herd and see the differences. Yeah, and we're all about the differences. It's very much our job is to spot the differences between them. The next one after that is the fore-udder attachment, which is how the udder is attached to the belly of the cow. Yeah, we're looking for a nice smooth attachment that goes all the way through. I was taught, I think Dennis Aiken was one that was teaching me that if you can put a hand in between the belly of the cow and the udder, then that particular the fore-udder, then you've got a problem.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, it cuts up.
If it cuts up, yeah. And again, when you see them on the move, you can see the fore-udder. That's when it really shows up how strong that ligament is. There's a lot of movement in that fore-udder. Then the next trait is the other attachment, is your rear udder attachment, and we're looking for a high wide attachment for exactly the same reasons. It just adds to the whole stability of the udder as well as the capacity. If you've got a really narrow rear udder going through, you're just lacking capacity within that udder to hold that milk. So,
and that links into where you said that the rump width, having it right there for that rear udder as well.
Absolutely, you want cows to add that extra capacity there and the extra stability by that rear udder attachment. And it is not a case that you need a 9 rear udder and I actually don't believe that 7, 8 and 9 rear udders will last longer within the herd. They're just more desirable, but I don't think essential for the everyday production cow. When you're starting to get down in 2s and 3s and 4s for rear udder, it means that there's no support on that back udder, and the whole udders can kind of get pushed through and get banged around. Is just not conducive for a long life within a milking herd. So it's always aiming to to increase that height and width of the rear udder.
And something you taught me, Wendy, when we did, I think my first year out, you described it as 5 rear udder is halfway between the bottom of the vulva and the hocks.
Yes.
And a 9 is if you can fit your hand and it pretty much hits your hand or runs past your hand underneath the vulva. That's your 9.
Correct.
Which I always thought was a really good description of, how much that changes looking at the rear udder of the cow.
Absolutely. The difficult part can be, for the TOP point of view, just as personally as a classifier, is that when they're in full milk, it's really easy to judge the height of the rear udder versus when they've just been milked out. But if you actually look at the little ligaments on the side beside the leg, you can pick them up without seeing the animal in full milk. And we do tests where we score an animal in full milk and then we milk them out and then rescore them to make sure that we're actually seeing the ligament in the right space and that we can actually judge them without the milk on them.
Because we do score them, we prefer to score them if you milk them as normal. So
correct.
If your inspector's there at 8:30 in the morning, just milk them as normal in the morning.
Yep.
If they're there at 2:00 in the afternoon, it's better if you don't have them full of milk and that you haven't. One, the cow's uncomfortable, potentially got way too much milk on her, and it can actually make the udder look worse. It can make the fore udder look bulgy, and it can sometimes start to flatten out that ligament if she's got too much milk in that rear udder as well. So it can be just as much of a negative thing when scoring the udder as it can be positive.
It's also, remember that we're looking at, particularly in sire proofing herds, when we're looking at 2-year-old information, it's the difference between it. So if they're all milked out at the same time, we're judging all animals at the same stage. So it's to get the differences between them, to recognise which ones have got the higher rear udders versus the lower rear udders is the essential bit as part of our job. Me personally, I've always considered udder just such an important part of the structure of a cow that it's actually lovely to see slightly more emphasis being placed on it within our New Zealand breeding industry at the moment. So the other trait that we look at in the udder is, of course, the teat placement. Both fore and rear teats are judged the same way, as in it's the centre of the udder. It's back to our 2-ray trait. So the centre is a 5. And when we mean the centre, we mean the bottom of the quarter is at a 5. And if it's wider than that, so typically if they're going to be wide, it's usually in the front teats. So if they are sitting slightly on towards the outside of the udder, they're a 4. 3, they're starting to angle out. And 2, they're kind of sitting on the outside of the quarter.
And 1's pretty much
straight out cafeteria type. Yeah, think of it
parallel to the ground.
Yes, yeah. And believe it or not, they are out there. And on the other side is the rear teats, which are more likely to be too close together. So 5's in the middle, 6 is starting to head towards the centre of the udder. And when you get the 8's, the rear teats are touching, and 9 is when they're actually crossing. The amount of milk on the cows can affect this, so we're trying to judge where the teat comes off the actual quarter rather than what the teat is doing as such, whether she's full of milk or hasn't got any milk.
Sometimes they might be tucked right inside, but if she's full of milk, they're not crossing because they can't, because she's full.
She's full, correct. But if they're right on the inside, they're still 9s. And of course, the length of the teat can make a difference. If you've got a very short teat and they are right tucked on the inside, they mightn't cross, but they're still 9 rear teats. And they are still unfunctional in the herd. It's the importance of having teat in the bottom of the quarter is all about drainage. You need the udder to drain out correctly and through the teat. So if they are right on the inside, it just doesn't do that. The next bit, of course, is all about management, and it was one of the most common complaints, particularly from my husband, about teats that are difficult to milk because you can't cut them. And overseas, robotic milkers just absolutely hate the rear, particularly rear teats and extreme front teats. If they're not in the right place, they're difficult to cut and not liked by the farmers. And then the last trait that we do there is the teat length, and short teats or small teats. We mark whether they're thin as well, but they're actually teat length as such as just the 1 to 9 trait, 1 being very short, buttons, which again are difficult to milk, and 9 being extremely long, which also comes with its problems. So could be considered a descriptive trait just because it's straight on length, but it is from 1 to 9 in this one.
And this is the length of the rear teats.
Rear teats only. The correlation between the length of the rear teats and the fore teats is high enough that by scoring the rear teats, we get good information. Again, there's always the exception, but work overseas has shown that there's a strong correlation between the length of the rear compared to the front.
And this trait, we've only been scoring this trait for, I think it'll be coming up 6 years
Yes.
now, because you started at my first year. We all measured our thumb
Yes.
when we first started doing this to kind of work it out. I remember my thumb was 6 centimeters.
Yeah.
And so that's when we linked it. So 6 centimeters worked out to be around about a 6.
Yes.
5 centimeters, 5, and then 9 and over and kind of under 2, which was, it's a very easy way to look at the trait.
Yes.
Made it very clear. There was a 1 centimeter difference between each of them.
Yeah. It's reasonably easy to score, and I think again it's your 1 and 2s on teat length that becomes an issue for milkability in the shed. Farmers hate them. They can have really strong ligaments, but short teats can make her unmilkable. Important trait for the industry, and I think a good step forward for the industry. And then the last trait that we catch is only on 2-year-olds. So when we do a whole bunch, we're trying to do the body condition score, and again it's getting the variations between the animals is the important bit. So that's only on 2-year-olds because that's when the data gets collected for animal evaluation purposes.
The only time that you might see it on an older animal is if an inspector has had to add it
Correct.
to your herd. Just the way that the handheld is set up, they're required to score it, but you can ignore it.
It's not going anywhere. So each year we do a calibration. TOP inspectors do a calibration to make sure that we're all on a similar line with regards to body condition scoring.
And all the other traits as well, just to make sure we still see them the same.
And it is a trait that's really important that they're all scored at the same time, because naturally enough, if we're doing a herd of 2-year-olds in September just after they calved, their body condition score range is different to perhaps if we're scoring them 2 or 3 months after or later. So it's that comparison with their herd mates that we're after. So that's all our traits. And then on top of that, we collect comment codes, which is, as I mentioned earlier, undershot jaws, long toes,
Udder slope,
quarters, yes.
blind quarters, the list goes on.
Yes, well, there's a whole array of comments that we can put up there, and we're doing that 1, 2, if we're classifying that. Can explain some of the classification scores. We take that into account. What I didn't mention is that we take all the body scores into account and give them an overall score. So DC is dairy confirmation. That's not taking her udder into account. So we could have, and I have had, a cow with a 9 body confirmation score, but with a 2 udder. So she can be absolutely fabulous in all her confirmation traits, with the exception of the udder traits, and her udder can be terrible, or vice versa. I've seen some really good udders on cows that have got functional traits that are just not good. They're lacking capacity, or if they've got an undershot jaw. So they are considered very separately in their final scores, so you can get a range between them. The most common scores in my ones would be 5.5, 6.5.
That you're seeing through.
So I'm seeing through 2-year-olds. For me, in my personal heifers, if I had a 6.6, I was quite happy because I knew she would develop out and just kind of mature out. So they've got the chance. That's out there for pedigree breeders that are doing their 2-year-olds. That doesn't necessarily will mean their final score. I have had some that do last, that never shift off their 2-year-old classification, but there's certainly room for improvement as they mature out.
Well, as a 2-year-old, they're still technically only, equivalent of a teenager, so they're still growing.
Absolutely. And we as classifiers can only judge on what we see at the time. We can think in our heads that, gee, she's going to make a nice cow when she matures out, and there's nothing functionally that would stop her from doing that. But at this stage, that's where she sits. So we're not into trying to predict the future. We can only judge what's in front of us at this particular point.
And there's, yeah, we do score a lot of traits, and we are given on average 2 minutes to do it.
2 minutes to do it, and it's a lot of concentration.
The brain is fried by the end of the day.
Yeah, you are absolutely exhausted because you are concentrating for that length of time. And so if you actually see a TOP inspector, take time out, have a drink, have a chat, or stare at the sky, it is just recalibrating, and that I tend to find after 2 hours of intense concentration, you just need to give your brain a break for 5 minutes and then go back into it so that we're scoring accurately. We're really aware that our job is to collect good data, and as such, probably facilities help just makes such a difference. The farmers that are there that supply staff, or if they're there themselves, opening and shutting gates, just not taking those extra steps to do that just saves our brain considerably and speeds the whole process up and gets good accurate data.
And if we start asking you random questions about absolutely nothing, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
We're trying to think about something else for a couple of minutes before we
focus again,
because that brain fade is a real thing.
It is. As I said, when you consider what your final body dairy conformation score is, you're taking everything into account and coming up with that final score. And there's some animals that just fit so easily into, you go, yes, she's definitely an 8 heifer, or she's a 9, or she's definitely a 2. And there's those ones in between that kind of really good enough for a 6, but she's not bad enough for a 5. And you'll
and unfortunately, we can't give half scores.
And you can't give half scores, so she's kind of on the lower range of 6, or the lower range, or higher range of 5, and we just have to make a call. But at the back of my mind too is that our job is to be consistent, recognise the differences, and we'll get good data out in the end. So that is the important bit, rather than getting absolutely every single animal spot on. We have to go with those averages to collect the data, because we're not perfect.
No. Some of us may think we are, but no,
we're not perfect, and we will see an animal different on the day. And just as farmers know that one day you can have a heifer looking absolutely spot on and beautiful, the next day she can not look like that, she can be slightly off, and we're only seeing that animal for 2 minutes on any one day to make a judgment call. So they do change. That's just what it is.
You've gone through all our traits now, which is what you would get if you were just TOPing them.
Yep.
So what's the difference then if you wanted to classify?
So classification gives a pedigree animal a final score that ranges from 70 points up to excellent 90 points, and we're now in the process of trying to get it beyond those, so we're looking at scoring excellent cows. It puts them into categories that you can easily see, and you can get printouts from Minder and I believe CRV on the herd recording companies that will leave a final score beside the cow. So it's an easy way of seeing how good or how bad she is in type traits. So if I've got I'm unlikely to mate it to AB.
Or likely use some beef.
Yes, beef is a very good correction tool. Also, so the next category would be your 80 to 84. That's where the majority of 2-year-old animals would fit in. If they're down at the 80, you've got some room for improvement to focus on. If you're an 84, then you're looking at a pretty smart animal. So it just gives you a really good overview of where she's sitting on those traits. We take the dairy conformation score and udder overall score into account when coming up with the final classification score. If she's a 7 cow and she's got a 7 udder, she's an 84 cow. So there's really clear combinations that give us where the final classification score will sit. The complicated one is when she's and as I mentioned before, 9 cow on a 2 udder or vice versa.
Those ones are very, very confusing. to try and work out in your head what they are.
Yes.
So I guess the difference between your 80 and your 84 is an 80 is a 5 6.
6, yes.
So a 5 6 gives you an 80 or an 81, and that difference between the 80 and the 81 is your classifier.
Yes.
Is they make that decision on, yep, she's got the 5 6. Do I think she's good enough for an 81, or did she just get a 5, or did she just get a 6? Yeah. So that's that difference there between the 80 and the 81. So yeah, when you've got that 5 6 gives you the 80 81 versus the 7 7, which is giving you
an 84. Correct. And it's similar on a
87,
87,
and
yes,
88.
and 88, and even an 85 and an 86. So your 87s is a 85 or an 86, and your 88s are 87s or 87s or 88s. So that's up to our discretion. And as you said, it's very much on how easily they fitted into those scores, is where they're sitting.
Especially if you're looking at a 2-year-old and she got you an 8, the highest a 2-year-old can go is 87 points.
Yeah.
And so you trying to decide between that 85 and 86, I always look at if there's some fault on her,
yes,
that you can see that you maybe not have been able to score on, she's going to sit at an 85, not an 86. That's kind of where it is.
Yeah, it's yes, that's just part of the whole decision process that we're making on the day. The classification scores also, if I've got a GP 84, 2-year-old, I'm really happy with that. She's got no obvious traits, and it means she's likely to go into develop, more likely, not always guaranteed, more likely to develop into a VG cow, or a potential for excellent later on. But if you've got a GP 84 kind of 8-year-old cow or 9-year-old cow, there's something that's just holding her back from this. She hasn't developed on. So she's a good functional cow, but there's some faults that I would consider would need correcting. I really like it when looking on pedigrees that you can see, or looking back on history, that you can see that this particular cow might have been a VG87 herself. She's bred on a VG84, 85, 86 heifer, so she's leaving me good confirmation stock. Always helps with sellability of animals at any particular sale when you provide the 3 GPs, and you can clearly see strong type all the way through the family.
So we have a rule in TOP and classification in New Zealand that if you inspect 2-year-olds, you are required to get all of your 2-year-olds inspected, regardless of if they're registered or not, by breed, by sire. So what that means is you would be required, if you were a Holstein Friesian person, to get all of your 2-year-olds by Holstein Friesian sires inspected. Can you explain to us why we have that rule?
Well, as I said previously, when explaining the traits, it's all about comparison to the herd mates to get true genetic value, and the 2-year-olds are the only time that you get a complete line of animals where there's no pre-selection done, so you haven't, particularly at first inspection, that farmer's just not selecting or hasn't culled out the worst of his heifers, so that you're seeing the complete line, so you can see whether the bull's leaving higher udder conformation traits compared to other ones within your herd, and same with body condition score of all these traits. So that is the time where we can gain the most valuable information about the bulls in the New Zealand industry, and it doesn't matter who's marketing those bulls, it's vital information for the industry, and even more so with genomics, because we need very good phenotypic information to make accurate data predictions for the future bulls of New Zealand, no matter which company's breeding them. The opportunity is lost if we don't collect this data on 2-year-olds. So if we allow industry that it was okay just to pick out your top 5 2-year-olds, there would be nothing to compare that to. Their breeding values would be inaccurate, because you've just picked that same bull. If you've picked out your 5 best animals by a particular bull, and there's another 5 back in your paddock that would score only half of what these other ones, that bull would get the positive scores go against its name and say, hey, what a wonderful uddered bull this one is. People would use it, and reality is that half of them are no good. So we need that information to know which of the bulls, what daughters are like that the bulls leave. So it's vital that the industry needs that information.
So why do you think it's important for farmers to use tools like TOP in their herd?
I think it's vital to create a healthy longevity within their herd. So if you've got a poor uddered cow or a poor uddered heifer and you mate her to a poor uddered bull, she may have a very good BW, but basically you're rearing that calf through, which is very expensive, and you bring her in 2-year-old, and your percentage or your chances of having a poor uddered heifer is very, very high. So if you're going to go to the cost of rearing replacements, I think for me it was just made financial sense to get the information on the animals and choose which cows that I mate AB or collect replacements from, examine the bull's TOP proof to reduce the chances of having an animal that's just going to go straight to the works as a 2-year-old after. So basically lose money on it. So you do get the odd exception that you get a decent animal out of it, but on the averages, it will cost you money if you don't take into account these type traits. The bulls are really essential for the industry to collect this data. It's just vital. Genomics isn't going to solve that. They need good data to actually make sound genomics. And as a farmer, you need good data on your heifers or on your animals to know which ones. It's just another piece in the puzzle. More data in, or more good information about your conformation. And I actually like somebody independent coming in and assessing the animals. It's another person on your farm that you can ask questions to. It's not about farmers being told what type of animal works for them. It is about providing data so farmers can work out which animals work for them.
We're not telling them that what they're doing is right or wrong.
No,
That's not our job.
this is about independent data on the conformation traits of your particular animal, and best possible thing would happen is that farmers make up their own mind what they want to breed and breed for it with purpose. So they've got data there so they can breed the type of animal that they want.
I think that's really important.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of links into how you can use this information
Yes.
as well. If you have the ability to get your classification done on your herd, that information, as you said, yes, it's vital to going into the bulls proofs and for you to get that information, but it's also a great tool in improving your herd going forward.
And there's no doubt that it improves your accuracy on the type traits for the BVs. And the more generations that you collect that accurate data on, the more accurate that information is going to be, particularly with the high heritability traits of stature, if that's important to you. Other traits, if you've got that data collected on your 2-year-olds each year, then that improves your BVs, which are now all available on Minder, that you can actually look through and say, actually, this is not suiting my system. I don't want to breed from that animal, or that I need to find a bull that will actually correct that trait or will help me out with that.
And I normally, anyone that I deal with that's done this work, when we look at the data, you're not trying to improve everything.
No.
Yeah, you might look at it and you'd be like, oh, there's so many things that I look at, I feel like I could improve. It's a really good way to look at it and pull out, I normally say 3 things that you think are the main things for the entire herd that you need to improve. And every herd is different.
Yes, very much so.
There's not really one trait that's bad across the entire country. Would you agree that it's more like a farm on farm?
Very much so. Really surprises me that herds that have had basically the same genetic input into there have shown up with different traits that perhaps need correcting. I've been on some herds where they are consistently very narrow in the rump width. That was a concern. Or other herds that have been very high in the pins, other herds that have been very curved in the legs and are having foot issues. Very individual to the farms, and so you can't say one thing fits all. And I've always said that there's no bad bull, it's just a bull used badly or incorrectly. So there's There's no perfect bull out there will fix everything. There will be bulls that will help assist in some traits. Probably the most common ones with, like, there's been a lot of discussion around legs in the industry, and there's farmers that have got, they want to correct curved legs on their cattle, they want to straighten them. Don't go and make them to a straight-legged bull. Always breed for correct, because traits aren't like statistics. They don't come out somewhere in between. If you made it a curved-legged animal to a straight bull that will leave straight-legged cattle, you'll end up with cattle with really curved legs and cattle with really straight legs. They don't average out and come in between. So this is not statistics.
Breed for the optimum, not for the extreme.
Correct. Yeah, always breeding for the optimum.
So I guess in saying that, when you're looking at that leg set, if you're looking at a bullproof, the optimum on a bullproof is for that leg trait to sit smack bang on the line in
Correct.
the middle. So if you have cows that are really sickle is to the right, straights to the left of the line, you want to avoid using bulls that are heavy to the right and aim for ones that are in the middle, slightly, ever so slightly to the left, but aim for the ones that are in the middle.
So it's real trick, actually, because with the bar graphs, it's so nice to, when you get presented this lovely bar graph, and they're all showing extreme lines to the right, which is supposedly all correct, but extreme lines to the right on some traits, such as legs, is actually really bad. Another classic one is
Rump angle.
Rump angle.
To the left.
You need that in the centre. Yeah. You also need teat placement. For rear teats, that means that they're really, really close. And teat length is another one to watch. So
two-way traits.
You actually need them in the centre. If it's swinging over to the right with all the rest, you're actually risk of breeding an extreme trait into the animals that wasn't intended. Always ask your rep. Just ask questions.
That's their jobs.
Yes, yeah. And if in doubt, ring the office and see if you can talk to a TOP inspector or something else. There's always, or just talk to another breeder. We'll talk cows for ages.
Hours and hours and hours. But yeah, I think that's really important if you're looking at using this data. So if you're a sire approving herd, as Wendy said, it does go on your minder, but if you want the actual breeder printout list, your AB company should provide it to you. If they don't, you can ask for it, or you can contact the breed society that did your inspection, whether it be Jerseys or the Holsteins, and they can send you a copy of that, and then you can look at it and you can sit down with an AB rep. If your AB rep is unsure, feel free to contact our office. I am more than happy to sit down with people and talk TOP. It's my life. So yeah, we are here to help. Our inspectors are here to help, and other breeders are here to help. So don't hesitate to get in contact with us.
And I actually find it really cool when the staff or people on the farm are actually interested in what they're doing. I'm more than happy to stop and give a demonstration. Sometimes a glazed look comes over their eyes because it's completely foreign. But if nothing else, if it gets staff or whoever's milking the cows actually looking at some of the traits that we are seeing, it just gives them another perspective on the cow. And it's not just another cow. They've all got individual good points and bad points, and makes them think about the animal themselves. So more than happy to answer questions.
Yeah, feel free to stop us and ask us questions, because I can tell you right now, our brains are going 100 miles a minute, and it's quite nice to actually stop.
Yes.
I'm more than happy to break a cow down, go through the individual traits and give you that explanation. And it also, and something that we haven't talked about, but we possibly should, is farmer traits.
Yes.
Almost forgot, but we should possibly talk about them. And I think if you can get your staff understanding what we're doing, then they might understand the farmer trait a little bit more. Do you just want to break down what those 4 traits are?
Yes. So the 4 traits is adaptability to milking. That is when they first arrive into the shed, whether she likes to jump out, whether she stands quietly. So it's just how quickly she settles into the milking routine. So these are all 1 to 9. 1 is that you don't like them or really bad. 9 is really good. So really, really simple. Important to score that as they come in to the shed. That's the
kind of in
'cause
that first couple of weeks.
yes, and I believe the app now, which is
Yes,
available, has been released earlier so that farmers
yes,
can do that.
yes. I was very busy doing that in the start of July and the end of June to get them out. So the HFNZ Farmer Trait app is available for sire proving farmers and pedigree farmers to score the farmer traits on. And as soon as, for sire proving point of view, as soon as your herd has reached over 80% tagged, then we will release your farmer traits of the herd onto your app. And it'll be there for you, and you can go back into it. So Wendy and her son Matt actually designed it. It is so user friendly. It is pretty much designed by farmers for farmers. So simple. Everyone should be able to use it and understand it.
The big advantage that I found is that you could score just the adaptability to milking when they came in the herd, and then you forgot about it for a little while. And then I used to go through at herd testing time to look at milking speed, because that was a really easy way to see how quickly the flasks were filling up for milking speed. And there is shed temperament at that. So the shed temperament score is very much trying to be taken almost a month or two once I've settled in, because I've had some heifers that I really wanted to cull in the first 5 or 6 days, but given 10 days later, you don't even know that they're there and that they've settled in really, really well. Conversely, I've had some that were um, really quite good when they first come in the shed. By the time a month or two later, they're kicking cups off, or they've developed bad habits, or they just haven't got a good temperament for the shed. So that's when they're scored. And then overall opinion. Once you take all those things into account, is this the type of heifer that you actually want to milk in the future?
Or is she never going to make it past a 2-year-old?
Or yes, would you want this heifer coming in again next year? And if the answer's no, then you've got a low overall opinion of her. Really important, just as it is with the TOP inspector, is to get the variation between. So what you're really wanting to identify are those really, really bad ones that you just don't want, because if that's a trait that the bull's leaving, then we don't want that bull in the industry.
And if you can't get it, well, if an inspector can't get it in a pen with the cow, that's
Yes.
a 1.
Yes.
I'm sorry, but that's a 1. Please put it down as a 1, because we can't. So, and
Yeah.
I have been chased out of pens, and I have scars on my legs from jumping over rails.
So yeah,
Yes.
it is. Yeah, overall opinion. The other one is milking speed, of course. That we really need to identify those slow milkers in comparison with the herd mates. I don't always blame the father for the negative traits, other than my kids. If there's a negative trait, I blame the father. But for dairy cattle, we're trying to identify the traits that are being left by the bulls, so that if there's a slow milker in your particular herd and the bull, a daughter of a bull in the next farmer's herd, and that's also a slow milker, then it kind of gives an indication. And if it's over 5 or 6 different herds, then it indicates that that's a genetic trait that that particular bull is leaving, versus one that might leave a slow milker in one herd, but in every other herd they're perfectly fine. Then that must have come through the dam side. So it's just, again, essential for the industry that the differences are identified, particularly for sire proving farmers. A whole bunch of 5s is not helpful for the industry.
Yes, please, please, please fill them out correctly and use the range.
Yes.
The range is there for a reason, so please use it. If everything's a 7, it's not accurate data.
No. And so it's really those ones that are really, really quiet and you just don't notice in the herd, give them a high score, give them a 9. And the ones that are poor, make sure they're down in the 1s, 2s, and 3s. So don't be afraid to use that range. And then if they've just got average, there's a few niggles, then that's fine. Put them in that 5, 6 range. Make sure there's a difference between those really good ones and the really bad ones.
I had a sire proving farmer that I went to a couple of years ago, and he said when he did his milking speed, he marked around, he had a rotary platform, and he used to mark spots around the platform that he was like, if the cups come off before this point. It's a 9, this is an 8, this is a 7. I thought that was brilliant.
Yes.
As you said, really easy in a herringbone to kind of look at the flasks, but if you've got a rotary platform, especially if they've got automatic cup removers, it's a really easy way to figure out where they are pointed. And then when you are using that range,
Yep.
you know, if she's got to go around twice, she's a 1.
Shed temperament, we used to have the numbers up on the wall. If anything played up that particular night, then her number went up, and then if she did it again, she had a line against her, and if she did it again, she had another line against her. And so when I was marked, so I didn't have to be in the shed all the time, but I could easily come in and see an animal with multiple lines against the name, and I know she was really bad. Or there's one that would only have 1 or 2, and then there was the odd one that was just cull and another word beside her. But it's just getting systems, and certainly the app makes it easier that you can easily go in and score her a 2 or a 3 to start off with, and if she's actually, you go back and think, and she wasn't that bad, that you can alter it before you send it through.
Yeah,
it's not the final score.
Until you press submit, you can change those traits as much as you want,
and you can just put 1 trait in at a time. You don't have to put the whole lot in.
Yeah, you can just go back into it, which is awesome. Matt, Wendy's son Matt, that designed it, did a brilliant job. It's such a great app. Please use it. I really like it. Plus, it saves me a lot of work with having to scan farmers' sheets and send them back to Sharon, and then Sharon has to enter them in. So Sharon likes people using the app because it's less work for her in the office, and I like people using the app because it's easier for the farmers and it's easier for me in the field.
Yeah, really essential to record in the app too, or if you're doing it by paper on the sheets, which animals haven't made it into the herd, which ones haven't calved, so that because we have to account for every 2-year-old that's actually recorded on the database. So if you haven't updated the database, and I know it's a busy time of year, we still need to account for them somehow.
Especially why she wasn't seen by the inspector. If she was, dried off for some reason or culled, it's important for you to put that on there. And the app's really easy. You don't have to put any scores in for her. You can just put in your comment codes that her fate was she is dead or she was culled, and the reason why could have been temperament issues or aborted or something like that. If you put that information in, then that goes through to your AB companies, and they like to have that data as well.
Yeah.
Cool. We could keep talking for hours about classification, Wendy.
If anybody's actually got interest in becoming a classifier, we're always after people that want to go out and learn how to do it and join the workforce. We're always happy to see.
We're a great bunch of people.
And we travel all around the country, which is the bit that I actually really enjoy. I love seeing different farming operations. There are so many ways to do it correctly out there that it's incredible. There's no one way, no one type of animal. I just like people that are interested in their animals. So
you've been doing it for so many years, Wendy. What would be the kind of most interesting or randomest experience you've had classifying? I've had, showing up on farm and doing it in absolute downpours. I've done it in sleet and snow. You had some interesting experiences on the west coast of the South Island.
Probably a couple of places really stand out to me. And one is to never judge what you're going to see by the entrance. Every farm's so unique. One farm down in Vicargill I can remember going to that I drove for an hour through sheep country, wondering where I was going and what I was likely to face because it was a sire-proving herd, and went through this little valley into just an amazing dairy area. I think there was only 1 or 2 farms down there, but just an incredible block that was so remote. But the cattle were beautiful, the farm was amazing. And it was, if I hadn't been classifying, I would have never ever seen that part of the country. Another one was down on the west coast. I loved doing the west coast. Going down there and classifying cows in a yard with lovely country music going in the background. Franz Joseph Glacier just in full view on a beautiful sunny day. It was just incredible. And again, you just get places that you would never ever get to and talk to farmers from such a wide range of places that that's the bit that I really enjoy.
I have driven the entire length of State Highway 1 doing this job, and the only place in the country now that I haven't been is Milford Sound. It's the only area that I
Haven't seen a lot of dairy herds
no,
there.
there's no dairy cows there, so that's the only one that I haven't been to. But yeah, it's definitely this. I've done that herd that overlooks Franz Josef Glacier, and it's beautiful out there. You literally drive pretty much to the top of Franz Josef Glacier, and there's this dairy farm, and then it's just like the glacier. It was not a nice day when I was there. You could see the glacier, but it was freezing cold.
Yeah.
The farms that you go to, I like doing sire proving herds because the variation
It's
that you
huge.
see
Yep.
is huge. The size of the farms, you know, like there's one in it's on Wyndham Station Road, and it's an hour and a half out of Invercargill in the middle of nowhere, and we do about 400 animals on that farm every year. So it's a double inspected job. It's a full day and is set up and everything. The guy that runs it's really lovely. And yeah, you just keep driving. You know, the locations that we have dairy farms in New Zealand is just incredible.
Yeah.
The fact that they can actually farm there.
Probably on that note, is probably as a dairy farmer, I'd probably like to say thanks to all the sire proving herds out there. They actually do a very, very valuable job in providing information for the industry. They're absolutely essential. And all the pedigree breeders that complete the 2-year-old inspections on all their animals. By them providing information to the industry, we can make better farming decisions on our place. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate anybody that's willing to, like, they get good information out of it, but I appreciate that it's time involved as well. So thanks as a dairy farmer.
So I think we'll leave it there.
Yep.
Otherwise, we'll keep talking, and we've already been here a while. So thank you, Wendy. As always, your knowledge and experience is muchly appreciated when it comes to topics like this. So thank you for sharing your knowledge today about TOP and classification. Our inspectors are actually on their way around the country now. So please be nice to us when we show up on farm. We are exhausted and we have possibly, if it's me, been driving for weeks on end. So yeah, we hope that this season's inspections go well for everybody. And as we said, like make sure that your farmer traits and stuff are filled out. If you want to get a bit more information about what Wendy and I have been talking about today, make your way over to our YouTube channel, the Holstein Friesian New Zealand YouTube channel. And there is a webinar up there with Tony O'Connor, who is the chair of TOP Advisory, discussing a more in-depth experience about classification and what the BVs mean and everything like that. So if you want more information on classification, head over to our YouTube channel. You can also find it on our Facebook page and on our website. Just as more information, we all like information and we all like learning. So you've got that opportunity there. But if you have any questions about today's topic or any other topics you would like me to cover, you can get in contact with me through our Facebook page or Instagram. Again, if you want to become a TOP inspector or a classifier, you can also get in contact with us through our website. These are all linked in our show notes. If you don't know what show notes are, it's the description. When you click on the episode, there's a little description, and then if you click on that, it'll give you the links for everything. Yeah, so thanks for listening. I will be back next month with a new guest and a new topic. Until then, happy farming. Bye.